For this movie we have Chieko Kido as our leading lady, voiced by Keiko Toda, who also was the voice of Hitomi in Cat's Eye. It's also the first movie to feature future jigen actor Akio Otsuka as this guy. Apparently its name is McCallum. The ending theme this time is Mihate no Yume o Oikakete, which apparently roughly translates to chasing after unfulfilled dreams. A G7 summit is called in the aftermath of primarily the Gulf War, but the early 1990s was a bit of a rough time for more than just that. Meanwhile, Zenigata's at the Museum of Modern Art, having received a calling card suggesting Lupin's targeting something there. With G7 taking priority, he's not exactly rubbing shoulders with New York's finest, however. A G7 researcher suggests that, in order to help the economy, they target Lupin's empire, rumoured to total $200 billion in value. Despite shrugging the researcher off, the delegates all rush to amass their forces. Lupin is hidden in a giant golden turd, which he uses to sneak around. Zenigata doesn't appreciate modern art, but quickly realises its purpose as a hiding place. New York's not-so-fine don't prove much help in the matter though, as they're a bit too trigger-happy, best demonstrated when they shoot up a wall Lupin's hidden behind. He's not injured, so the chase continues. In fact, their eagerness for shooting first reveals they were just robot legs, as Lupin makes off with his target, a vintage 1908 Packard. His client is more into modern cars, unfortunately. That plus Zenigata soon has him surrounded. Luckily, he has a remote-controlled helicopter on hand to airlift him to safety. Hiding out in rural Scotland, Lupin tunes up the car for an upcoming race held by the Martin Beck Foundation from Madrid to Paris. The prize is a dictionary once owned by Napoleon, and Lupin's after it because he's curious as to whether it's true that the word impossible isn't there, as he's used that claim himself a few times in the past. Zenigata meets with Officer Chieko Kido, who escorts him to Japanese Prime Minister Umibei. He's offered about 5 times his usual pay as part of a government task force designed to apprehend Lupin. The CIA also have their own agent, a man named Robert Hawke. Just as a funny aside, they also make the hilariously wrong prediction that this man, who is definitely not President Bush, will see a second term no matter what due to his current high approval rating. Lupin's well aware they're being watched and have been since he arrived in Scotland, but still has some work to do on the car. Jigen borrows his Walther for some extra ammo and makes his move on the watchers. He does pretty well until Hawke manages to get the drop on him. Fortunately, Lupin's had enough time to finish the modifications and comes to the rescue. Not that it matters too much to the CIA, as they have him tracked via satellite. Zenigata finds Goemon watching a samurai movie and asks about Lupin's current location. Goemon refuses to help, more interested in quoting the movie as he walks off. The day of the race arrives, and it's definitely a great one for a race this big. Fujiko is also among the competitors, eyeing up a certain racer by the name of Eric. As they begin, Jigen suspects there's more to this than just wondering about a word being in there. Lupin explains that the dictionary was initially stolen by the woman who would eventually marry Arsène Lupin. It also holds the clue to a family treasure, but the woman would end up hiding it from Arsène later in life due to his wasting of money. Lupin II wasn't much better, as he gave up the dictionary to cover his gambling debts. The race is the best opportunity for Lupin to reclaim the dictionary, and his modifications to the car should be enough to give him the edge. Zenigata's instincts lead him to deduce Lupin's plans, so he heads to Spain with Kido. Lupin spies Fujiko among the racers. Hawke fires a homing missile his way. As he evades it, he passes Fujiko, warning Eric about her true nature. Thankfully, one of the mods Lupin made was the ability to go underwater, which allows him to escape the missile. Unfortunately, Hawke is waiting for them when they resurface. Zenigata finds the car abandoned and decides to go ahead alone, telling Kido she'd just get in his way. Lupin has a remote control for the car in his tooth, and Kido becomes a passenger on it as it starts moving. Jigen taunts Hawk on his CIA affiliation, but Hawk ignores it, more interested in the treasure, despite Lupin feigning ignorance. They end up getting interrupted by the French and Israeli task forces, making an attack on Hawk's transport. Zenigata's out of fuel. Not helping is that his car's wood-powered. He manages to hitch an uninvited ride aboard another passing car at least. Goemon arrives on the scene, cutting up the CIA transport and freeing Lupin while still quoting the samurai movie. Hawk gets wind of this, but the Packards manage to catch up to them. Jigen fires at Hawk, sending him off a cliff. They then question Kido, who claims that she was another racer that lost her own car. Fujiko's been getting close to Eric in the meantime. They're interrupted when he has to take a phone call. Left alone, Fujiko roots around and finds some jewels. More concerning is that she also finds a gun. Eric is actually an agent of the CIA, and fully aware of Fujiko's identity as he relays to a still-alive Hawk. Hawk tells him about his plans for Lupin, and to focus on winning the dictionary, leaving as Fujiko comes out of the tent to discuss racing as a team. The G7 delegates hold another meeting, partly to chastise the American side for being too open in their attack, and partly to form a multinational force to bring Lupin in together. Lupin enlists Kido to help out with tuning up the car, though Jigen's suspicious and decides to tail her. Lupin's low on spark plugs, but Zenigata's happy to hand him a spare. Jigen confirms his suspicions when he overhears Kido talking with her superiors. As Lupin and Zenigata pass by, he decides to take her hostage. Lupin and Zenigata reach the pit stop in Bordeaux. Lupin tries to warn Zenigata that he's in danger from the G7 forces too, but it falls on deaf ears as he's more interested in using his newfound salary to get a suite at the Hotel Grand. They have a meal together, and Lupin slips a pill in Zenigata's drink. He then proposes a toast to his arrest. Jigen learns of Lupin's location and heads to meet him, dropping Kido off and questioning her on if she feels free working her current job. He crosses paths with Goemon as he arrives at the Grand. Goemon's still quoting the samurai movie, making mention of a line about red and white kimonos representing jail and death respectively. The sleeping pills take an effect, allowing Lupin to disguise himself as Zenigata and vice versa. The multinational force make an attack on the room. The disguises prove effective at least, as they make a grab for Zenigata dressed as Lupin. Hawk doesn't get the message, firing at the room from a helicopter. Zenigata runs to the ballroom as he tries to evade the force, where Goemon makes an appearance on stage. The audience think it's all a big show as he attacks the force, but even he and Jigen are fooled by the disguise. Lupin has his own troubles when he encounters Kido just seconds before he's about to move out himself. Fujiko and Eric have had a pretty quiet time of it, currently on the home stretch to Paris. Jigen and Goemon are also en route by water. Hawk makes another attack on the gang. Zenigata blows his disguise when he lets slip on the lack of knowledge about the dictionary's treasure, so Jigen and Goemon dump him on a pier. Still in disguise, Lupin takes the train to Paris with Kido. She admits she's doubting her current position and brings up the topic of Lupin and Zenigata's rivalry. Lupin elaborates that it's mutually respectful between the two of them, and that if anyone could catch Lupin, it's Zenigata. They arrive in Paris, and Lupin questions her next move before kissing her as they separate. The race's MC gets the dictionary ready to present to the winner. Unfortunately for him, Lupin's infiltrated as his chauffeur. He's also gullible enough to just hand over the dictionary. Lupin then separates the front of the car from the back and leaves them to accidentally cross the finish line themselves. To answer the eternal question, the word impossible is in fact in Napoleon's dictionary, as Lupin relays to Jigen. His pursuers pick up on their conversation, with Hawk reaching him first. Hawk's past caring about any loyalty to his country, but Lupin buys himself some time by pointing out that he's the only one who can discover the dictionary's secrets. Zenigata readies a police blockade, but learns it's pointless as Lupin already has the dictionary. Eric also learns of this and heads to Hawk and Lupin. They decide to kill Fujiko if Lupin doesn't talk. Just as he's about to, Zenigata comes to the rescue. Eric and Hawk pursue them on a train, but Jigen's on hand to help. He shoots Hawk upon learning that it doesn't even care about the treasure now, and for once the bullet isn't blocked by the book acting as a pocket protector. Damage aside, Lupin inspects the dictionary for any clues. The heat from the bullet reveals part of a map on one page in invisible ink, so he heats it further. The treasure's location is situated at the backwards named Napoleon Castle in Normandy. Wonder if this is where that name came from back in episode 14 of series 1. The gang head to the castle, and despite his complaints and continued movie quoting throughout, Goemon keeps watch for the incoming multinational force. Zenigata, who was brought along, reunites with Kido, both voicing their concern that this might be overkill. She also questions his actions on the train ride, still not aware that it was Lupin. With some extensive digging, the gang find the treasure. It turns out to be a prototype radio along with some patent papers. It's pretty much worthless though, as the radio uses vacuum tubes as opposed to transistors. Could also be that the whole thing was a troll by Arsene anyway, given what it was like in the glimpses we get of him in the manga and Lupin III. They head up to take care of the multinational force, but quickly lose ground. Lupin uses his jacket to signal the aerial forces to a tower. He then has Goemon slice up a bunch of missiles that get fired their way. Strapping the remains to the tower, he activates a bomb strapped alongside them, creating a makeshift rocket to escape. They're not out of trouble yet, and worse still, the car's out of fuel. Kido and Zenigata arrive, shooting down the planes. Lupin's pleased to hear she's decided to take the gang's advice on living freely, hinting at his identity on the train ride before telling them the treasure's still in the castle. Fujikawa's angered that the whole heist ended with them empty-handed as the missiles run out of fuel, sending them into the sea below. Somewhat more easygoing story this time round. You know, despite the G7 force that was put together to apprehend them for the treasure. As for the hanging thread of the post-Gulf economic crisis that kicked this all off, well, serves them right for putting their hopes on stealing from Lupin of all people. I guess they could always lie about the value of the radio or something. They are politicians after all. The art and animation seem to take a bit of a hit here. Art-wise, there are shots that look really detailed, but then others that have some very basic facial features and not much else. Sort of like some of the rougher Series 2 and 3 episodes. In terms of animation, they do make use of a few techniques to mask it, but there's a noticeable choppiness to a lot of sequences. Probably one of the most awkwardly animated takes on the wall running sequence too. Might be why there's not quite as much focus on the race itself, as we've seen car animation done better in previous outings. Still, at least it lands story-wise for the most part. Goemon's dialogue being 90% quoting the samurai movie is an oddity, but I guess I just wanted to give him a quirk here. I do like they remembered Jigen has a disdain for the CIA. One big plus is that Zenigata definitely gets more to do this time round at least, given he spent most of the last movie locked up. Nice to get some insight on how Lupin imitates him down to the voice when making use of that disguise too. I also quite like the exchange between Lupin and Kido on the train. Interesting to hear what he thinks about his relationship to Zenigata, as for all of his mocking of the Inspector, he does seem to have at least some respect for the rivalry they have. Next time, the gang infiltrate the Bank of Liberty in a search for gold that's from Russia with love. Until then.